Good afternoon, Faith Church family. Hope you guys are having a good Wednesday afternoon. Pastor Mike here, and I want to come really with an update on a variety of different things. First of all, a number of you have asked about the different videos that we were doing every week. We had the Monday Mindset, Theology Thursday, the Saturday Sabbath prep video. And so forgive me and forgive us for not communicating a little more clearly and a little more concisely on that. The plan has been all along that as we begin to reopen, that we would shift away at least from that many videos during the week. And so what things will look like, just so you know moving forward, is what we thought would be helpful and maybe the best posture moving forward is that we would do one video one time a week. And then once a month during that time, we would use that space to do more of an update, to look back at maybe some things that had happened in the previous month, as well as look ahead to some things that are coming up in the coming month. And so this video will function more like an update than it will a Monday Mindset or a Theology Thursday or something of that nature. But really the videos moving forward will be kind of a hybrid version of what we have been doing. And interestingly enough, before COVID started, if you can remember, there was actually life before COVID. It's kind of hard to think that way, but that did exist at some point in time. But we had talked about doing something of that nature where we had some kind of regular video that allowed us to interact on some different things. So by God's grace, it actually allowed us to lay some of the groundwork on some of that stuff. And so that'll be the plan moving forward. You'll see one video a week, probably coming out later in the week, Wednesday, Thursday, most likely Thursday. And different guys will handle stuff, and it'll be kind of, like I said, a hybrid of those different items. And really the goal of the videos, they're to be informative. If there's certainly information that needs to get passed along, we'll get to some of that here in just a moment. Or it's also meant to encourage, to stimulate, and to challenge us in our spiritual lives. And so with that, let me just update you on a few different things that are coming up, or the things that you might want to be in in the loop on. And so one of the things we've been asking you for is for input into our What Does the Bible Say series. And so thankful for the number of you that gave us input on that. I always find it so intriguing to see what comes in. And we've done this before, and sometimes there's more of an emphasis on contemporary issues. Other times there's more of an emphasis on theological issues. And sometimes you're kind of in the middle. And so it's been kind of intriguing just to watch what all has come in this process. But we'll kick that series off. That series will start on June 28th. And right now we're looking at 7 weeks of what we're going to do with that. And so some of the topics that we're going to engage, I'll go ahead and reveal some of those now. We haven't landed the plane entirely, so there's a few things that we're still not sure about, but some things we know definitively that we're going to do is we're going to talk about what does the Bible say about the Bible? How should we think about the Bible itself? What does the Bible say about how to understand the Bible, and looking at different parts of the Bible and the Old Testament and the New Testament? How do we understand what's going on? How do we apply that? How should we read that? Things of that nature. We're going to talk about women in ministry. We're going to talk about, as believers, what's our posture with respect to political issues, political correctness, varying political opinions, things of that nature. We're also going to talk about what's the appropriate response that we should have when we look at various aspects and items of injustice. And so that's not the entirety of the series, but those are things we know for sure are going to get engaged as we move through that series. And then a couple of other items that might be helpful. One, for the items that we don't engage or we don't preach on a Sunday morning, when we get into the series, one of the things that we're going to do is we'll do some kind of round table. We'll probably put all the pastors around the table, and we'll talk through some of these different items that were submitted but ultimately not preached on in the series. The other thing to keep in mind is this is a series where we'll build in time into our service to allow for text-in questions at the end of the message. Now, the goal of that is not to stump your pastor. That's a pretty easy game to play and to win. The goal is to get clarity or biblical understanding, or try to connect dots on real life on those different issues. And so we'll do some of that. And even those of you who are jumping on digitally, you're not exempt from that, because you'll have a phone number you can text into. And then, of course, we don't necessarily get to answer all the questions, but you have a chance to participate with that. So just know that's what's coming down the line. Obviously, we've got a few more weeks in Micah. Some really great stuff coming up here in these next few weeks, but then we'll get into the What Does the Bible Say series. Another thing just to have in front of you is with respect to prayer. For the last number of weeks, we've been meeting every Wednesday night as a church to pray. And again, that was never the intent that we would move to a weekly gathering, although we had intended to move to a monthly gathering. And so again, some of the groundwork got laid graciously by God to move us forward in a really healthy way. And so what that'll look like, a couple things. things is one, as leaders, we're gonna highly prioritize and emphasize that time together as a church. It's a significant item for the church to gather and to pray corporately. And so we're unashamedly just going to tell you that we're prioritizing that. We're making that a serious emphasis of what it looks like to be together as a church body. And so a couple days you might want to put on your calendar, June 30th and July 28th. Those are both Tuesdays. On Tuesday evening, we'll gather 6 to 7 p.m. in the sanctuary and pray together. And then we'll do some kind of dessert or some kind of finger food or something like that afterwards. I know for June 30th, we're going to do ice cream. Not for sure about July 28th, but you can just know that that we're going to build in some kind of food element to that, or at least that'll be typical or standard with our gatherings. And so I want you to put those on your calendar and plan to join us for that. I don't know moving forward that it'll always be on Tuesday evenings, but we are looking to find a night, land on that night, and run with it. A couple other things that are coming up that I just want you to be aware of, and particularly for this next one, actually I want you to communicate this with others. But a while back we were solicited to potentially host a blood drive, and then COVID stuff really ramped up and that disappeared. But they've come back to us. They've asked us if we'd be willing to use our facility to host a blood drive within our community. We've agreed to do that. And so while we're waiting for final confirmation, most likely it'll be on Tuesday, June 23rd. And that'll be roughly from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And so I'm telling you this for a couple reasons. One, if you want to come and donate, we would encourage you to come and to participate in that way. And there'll be information going out with how you can sign up and all kinds of things of that nature, but also to communicate with people that you know in the community, to share in that. Obviously, that's been a huge issue in the medical community, not having enough blood. So this is a really easy, tangible way for us to share and to participate with that. And so there'll be more info, some flyers, things like that, that'll come out electronically and digitally that you can just pass along and share with people. And so I want you to know about that. Looking back, one thing that I do want to just mention from the month of May is we had a crew of people that went up to Montrose to Mountaintop Retreat, and we've done this for a number of years where we help get the camp ready. And so thankful for the folks that went up there and worked. Because it was a drier winter, there wasn't as much work. Of course, with COVID, we had a smaller crew than typical that went up there. But by God's grace, we got everything done. But one thing I'd encourage you to do, in Colorado, camps are shut down through the month of June. And so that's a huge month for Mountaintop and a lot of the things that they tend to do. And so we'd just be encouraging you to be praying for that camp, for Steve Reeve, and certainly for all the camps in Colorado and the ways that they're having to adjust in this season. And then one final thing, I want to pivot here away from events and some of the stuff, and I just want to deal with as I've heard certainly from a number of you recently, just the variety of items and issues that are unfolding in our nation and our land, and the turmoil and the tumultuous reality that is life in America right now. And one of the things, church, that I've appreciated is so many of you that have reached out to me is you're saying, hey, I want to know how to respond well. I want to know how to respond righteously. I want to think biblically, and I want to think with gospel lens and perspective on this, but I'm not totally sure how. How do I do it? Well, we could spend 45 minutes talking about how to do that. And when we get into the What Does the Bible Say series, we'll actually spend some time engaging and interacting with that. But let me just maybe give us some brief encouragement and exhortation on this here today. And loved ones, if I could just be really simple and simplistic and very clear on this, here would be my encouragement to you is, loved ones, that you would keep your eyes on Jesus, that you would put your hope in him and what is to come because of him and because of his finished work. And what we want, right, as followers of Jesus, we want the voice of God and the voice of Jesus to be the predominant voice in this conversation. And so we don't want to ignore what's happening. That's a bad move, okay? We don't want to pretend like things aren't happening. That's a bad move. But we want the voice of Jesus to be the voice that is being heard. And so I can't think of a better text to speak to this than from 2 Corinthians chapter 4. Here's what the Apostle Paul says, and I think it's just a really helpful attitude and mindset for us as we consider and think about and persevere and press on in this season that God has us in. Here's what he says. He starts by saying this. This is the conclusion of an argument that he's been making, but he says, so we do not lose heart. Loved ones, if nothing else, God help us that we wouldn't lose heart, that we would persevere, that we would press on, that we would keep going by God's grace in this season that God has for us. And then he says this. He says, though our outer self is wasting away, our inner self is being renewed day by day. Now listen to what he says next. He says this, for this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison. Now, you might be tempted to look at that and think, well, that's just because things weren't that bad in his life. Well, here's how Paul actually started the letter. He says that they were so utterly burdened that they despaired of life itself, and they believed that they had received a death sentence. So when Paul is talking about this light momentary affliction, he's not talking about some kind of casual, mild type of suffering. No, it was intense. But what he's doing is he's putting it in light of or in the context of eternity and how it is that we want to think. And so even today, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that this is inconsequential, but it is light and momentary in comparison to the eternal weight of glory. Not because I say that, not because anyone else says that, but because God says that. Right? And again, we want God's voice to be the prevailing voice in this. And so let's let this affliction prepare for us an eternal weight of glories. I was thinking about what Paul's saying in 2 Corinthians 4, and I was thinking about all that's going on. How do you and I respond? Well, loved ones, what we do is we point people to the only true hope that exists, which is found in the person of Jesus. Do you remember back in John's gospel when Philip comes to meet Jesus, and then he goes to Nathanael, and he's like, hey man, we found the Messiah. And Nathanael's response, quite snarky. He's like, can anything good come out of Nazareth? I mean, it's just such a snarky response. And I love what Philip says to him. He says, come and see. For us today, how do we respond? What do we do with this? How do we interact with people? We invite people to come and see the only one who can remedy the ills and the turmoil and the tumult of our nation, which is the person of Jesus. And so, loved ones, let's press forward in that. By God's grace, let's continue in that. Let's love our neighbors and our coworkers and the people around us well, and let's love them well by inviting them to come and see the only one who offers true hope. I love you, Faith Church, and looking forward to worshiping with you this Sunday. Have a good day.